So let's turn to our practice for today. This week's Torah portion is Akev. I'm going to share my screen in a moment. Thanks, Adi. We'll put the link to the text that I'll be sharing in the chat box. And I just want to spend a few minutes before we engage in practice to look at one of the most important themes I think that comes up in this Torah portion, Akev, which is the theme of Hodaya, of gratitude. For some of us, that is a quality that comes quite easily. There are a number of people I've met in my lifetime who kind of easily evince and experience and manifest that sense of gratitude, and others for whom it's a struggle, either because it's difficult to focus on that for which there's a reason to have gratitude, or because of fear of experiencing gratitude, for fear of the grief one might experience when one loses something that one is grateful for. So it's can be kind of protective. So I want to focus today on gratitude and maintaining an awareness of that for which we are grateful. Thanks, Eddie, for putting the link in. I'll share my screen, and I called this Remembering What Cannot Be Forgotten. So here's the text from the Torah that I wanted to focus on from this week's Torah portion. It's in chapter 8 of Deuteronomy. We're just early in the book of Deuteronomy in the cycle. And here's Moses as part of his long farewell address to the people, speaking to them, to the generation that is going to, that has been born in the wilderness and is going to be entering the promised land. And Moses says to them, and I'm going to jump around here, I'm not going to read it all. Yud-He-Vav-He, your God, is bringing you into a good land, and then goes into detail, land of brooks and of water, of fountains and depths, springing forth in valleys and hills, wheat, barley, vines, fig trees, pomegranates, etc. And then to verse 10, a phrase that may be familiar to many of you. The Hebrew is Va'achalta v'savata uberachta et Adonai Elohecha. You shall eat and be satisfied and bless Yod-He-Vav-He, your God, for the good land which God has given you. So we will be brought into a good land. Our needs will be taken care of. We will eat and we will experience satisfaction, a state of sova in Hebrew, and we will bless God. But then Moses goes on to warn the people. Hishamer lecha, beware, says Moses, Pentishkach et Adonai Elohecha, lest you forget Yod-He-Vav-He, your God, and not keeping God's commandments and ordinances. Verse 12, Pentochal v'sabata, lest when you have eaten and are satisfied, and you've built houses and dwelt in them, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, lest you forget God when you've eaten and are satisfied, because then your heart will be exalted. Ram labavcha, v'shachachta et Adonai Elohecha. Your heart will be exalted, and you will forget Yod-He-Vav-He, your God. So here Moses is warning about forgetting about God as the source of our blessings. And the issue here is what happens when we are in a state of satisfaction, of sova. He goes on to say, if you forget God, that we will say in our hearts, it's my power and the might of my hand which has gotten me this wealth. So, says Moses to the people, but you shall remember Yod-He-Vav-He, your God. It's God who gives you power to get wealth. Whatever we have, whether, and not just in material sense, but our very lives are dependent upon God. And the danger, I'm just going to stop for 1 second here. The danger is that this is a reality, a truth that we can perceive when we are in a state of spiritual awareness, that it all comes from God, however you choose to understand God. Our very breath or life, moment to moment, sustained by God. But when we're in a state of satisfaction, we may fall asleep and we may forget. We may lose track of it. And so that phrase, "V'achalta v'sabata u've'rachta," is a phrase that's used as the basis for the grace after meals, the Birkat HaMazon, the blessing to be said after one eats. Of course, there are blessings to be said before we eat, but that's a blessing to be said after we eat, as a way of recognizing that actually when we really need to say a blessing as a reminder that, wow, it wasn't just that I made a delicious meal, but that everything that I prepared ultimately stemmed from a deeper source, from others, however you want to understand it, from a huge, unfathomable web of life that made that possible. Okay, so back to the share for a minute. So the Sfat Emet, a Hasidic commentator on this, says that we only rebel against God when we're satisfied. The danger is becoming self-satisfied. If that's the case, then "you shall bless" serves as a corrective so that one does not become rebellious. In other words, when Moses says to the people, "You'll be satisfied and then bless," that's an instruction to engage in a practice to notice when we are satisfied and to remember something that we have forgotten, to wake up. Now, here's a teaching that I just personally love from a Hasidic source. The holy Yehudi of Przusha went to visit the Jose, the seer of Lublin, found him distraught, moaning from the depths of his heart, and asked him, "Why are you moaning?" And so the seer of Lublin said, "I've transgressed the negative commandment, which we just read. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God. For one small second, I didn't pay attention, and I didn't give my heart to the reality of God." Okay, so he's very upset because he's forgotten about God as the source of being. The Holy Yehudi says to him, there's a Mishnah that addresses this directly. Don't worry. If a sheaf that weighs a time, 2 seahs, these measures, was forgotten in a field during the harvest, it is actually not considered forgotten and available for gleaning by the poor. And this is the upshot here. The reason for this is that something of value, something good, is never forgotten. And if someone should forget it, they remember it right away, since something forgotten that is eventually remembered does not qualify as forgotten. This certainly applies here, and you didn't transgress the negative commandment, since you surely remembered right away. So as I understand the upshot of this teaching, which is based on a Mishnah about when is a sheath that is left behind in the field forgotten and available for gleaning by the poor, there's a teaching that says that if it's remembered soon after and it's of a certain value, it's as if it was not forgotten in the first place. And since so much of our mindfulness practice is about shuttling back and forth between remembering and forgetting, we set an intention to remember, to focus on what is happening, and then we drift away. We fall asleep, we get distracted, we lose our awareness, we daydream, we get distracted, as I said, and then we remember. And we come back to our intention, and we rinse and repeat, and that's basically the upshot of the mindfulness practice. And in meditation, we set an intention for our focus, our mind drifts away, we come back to our intention. What this adds to that is that if we remember, then what we think we have forgotten in the interim actually is not forgotten. It was there all along. I love that because it takes a little bit of the sting out of, oh, I forgot. Oh, how could I forget? How could I forget? How could I have been so blind? So it recognizes the inevitability of human forgetfulness. And it says that, of course, that's going to happen. We are going to forget. But when we remember something that's good, that we think we have forgotten, it's as if it was never forgotten at all. It's there. So I want to share one more quote, and then let's turn to practice, which is kind of the British literary equivalent of that teaching, at least as I get it. So here it is. This is a quote from actually a Dickens novel that I don't think I'd ever heard of, called The Old Curiosity Shop. And it takes place in this conversation between somebody who is, like in the Hasidic story we just read, distraught because of a loss. Something is lost. And her friend says, no, there's nothing innocent or good that dies and is forgotten. Nothing innocent or good dies and is forgotten. Let us hold on to that faith or none. An infant, a prattling child dying in its cradle, will live again in the better thoughts of those who loved it, will play its part through them in the redeeming actions of the world, though its body be burnt to ashes or drowned in the deepest sea. There's not an angel added to the host of heaven, but does its blessed work on earth in those that loved it here. Forgotten? Oh, if the good deeds of human creatures could be traced to their source, how beautiful would even death appear. For how much charity, mercy, and purified affection would be seen to have their growth in dusty graves. There's a lot to unpack there, but to me, it's extremely powerful idea that everything ultimately can be traced back to its source. And so that which we think of as forgotten, in a sense, really never is forgotten. It is present. So I wanted to invite us to bring that into our practice today, and invite, if you'd like, to bring your focus to a sense of fullness, to gratitude, satisfaction, sova. That might be easier for some than for others. Otherwise, you can choose an anchor for yourself, for your practice, which could be sensation of sitting in the chair, sensation of the temperature of the air in the room, the ambient sounds around you. Of course, it's always could be the breath, the sensation of breath entering and leaving the body, filling the belly, filling the lungs, passing through the nostrils. Or it could be having a sense of fullness with life just as it is. Just as it is, accepting life as it is right now, because it can't be other than what it is. So let's find a posture that's comfortable for us. As I mentioned earlier, you can be sitting on your seat, your chair, your cushion, the floor. You could choose to stand for your practice. You could even choose to lay down on the floor if that's what seems advisable for you today, your choice. And just take a few deep breaths into the belly. Notice what that does. If you like, as I do, to place one hand or even both hands over your heart space, to feel that as a source of support and compassion. Receive the gift of a few moments of breathing and awareness of just being alive. Notice any desires for things to be other than the way they are right now, wherever you are or in your life. Don't fight those desires, just note them. You can become aware of the wish list. Just put that down to the side for now. Hodaya, gratitude, comes from a root which simply means acknowledging, recognizing what's true right now, just as it is. Bringing ourselves flush with the experience of life as it is right now, even just for a few moments. So we'll sit for the next 10 minutes, and if, as is probably inevitable, we drift away and forget our intention, when we wake up and remember, come back to that intention and remember that it's been there all along. It is not forgotten. The goodness is never forgotten. So let's sit for 10 minutes. Last few minutes for our practice together. The eyes are closed, leaving them closed. Gaze is softened. Practice being flush with our experience, being fully present to each breath and aware of the ways in which we are immersed in a sea of chiyut, of divine life energy that animates our breathing, our pulse, the synapses that are firing the nervous system. You can sense a feeling of sova, of satisfaction, just being part of it. We can note that this is not due entirely to the power of our own hands, but a power that is beyond us and that flows through us and sustains us right now in this moment, in this breath. And we can end by whispering to ourselves words of bracha, of gratitude, and simply say, thank you for this breath. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for this life. And if your eyes have been closed for our practice, I invite you to slowly allow them to open, and if your gaze has been softened, to come to focus and silently thank everybody who is here as part of our practice and acknowledge those who are grieving losses, honoring losses of this time, yard sites. And as always, we seal our practice by inviting those of you who wish to join in the recitation of the Mourner's Kaddish and to add their name or names of anyone you're including in our practice today in the chat box if you would like. You rise in body or in spirit. Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash,
Gadal B'di Kadash
Shemei Rabbi,
Amen.
Yamad, Divra, Hirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei,
Chayechon,
Yom
Chon,
V'chayei
Bet
Kol Beit
Israel, Ba'agala
Yisrael,
B'zman Karuv.
Ba'agala B'zman Kariv, V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba,
Shmei Rabba,
Baruch Shabbat, Yitar,
Vitada,
Yitar,
Vitale, Vitala, Shmei Kedusha,
Yitadar,
Barichu, Ban, Kol
Barichu.
Shechus Bachta, V'nachmat Adam, V'cham B'arana, V'imru Amen. Yeshlamach Abba Min Shemayim, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Kol Israel, V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Shalom Onomrav, Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Kol Israel. Amen.
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 Yosef Shalom. Aleinu ve'chol Yisrael ve'chol Yosef Level Vimru Amen.
Thank you all for joining us for today's daily meditation sit. We hope that we will see you back here same time tomorrow.
Back.
Oh, Marc is back.
My internet cut out there for a moment. Thanks, Adi, for stepping in. And thanks, as always, for holding our space with grace and skill, as you do. We're all grateful for you for that. We're grateful to each of you for showing up and being present, and we look forward to joining you for practice the rest of this week. Just a gentle reminder, if you haven't signed up for the Shofar Project, to please do so. And for those leaving, hope you'll join us tomorrow. We'll be led in practice by my friend and colleague, Laura Hegfield, will be leading us from New Hampshire tomorrow, and at 12:30 Eastern time, as always. Those who would like to stay on, who for any conversation or questions, I am happy to respond. And if you can put those in the chat box, that would be lovely, and I'll keep an eye on that. And for those who are leaving, we hope you have a safe and healthy rest of the day, and we hope to see you tomorrow or sometime soon. So, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat box. And again, thanks so much to everyone for the warm welcome back. It feels very, very good. I'm just going to keep an eye and see if there are any questions. And if not, then we can bring that practice into the rest of our day. Yeah, Dee, let's see if you happen to have see if I have, here's the link to the, here's the link to the text sheet for today, which has the citations. Let's see if I can ask myself a question. I guess I'll reiterate, I think, just because I find it helpful for myself to, as always, at the end of our sits, I always find it helpful to reiterate the teaching as I've heard it. And even if I'm giving it over, sometimes I'm not so sure if I understand it correctly. And there's something paradoxical about the teaching for today, because what I loved the passage where Moses instructs the people, or reminds the people, that when we eat, when we're satisfied, we should bless. And the explanation for that is that we need to bless after we've eaten as well as before, because we will make the mistake of, in our satisfaction and our comfort, of becoming deluded into thinking that we are the be-all and end-all of life, and forget our source. That's really basically what it comes down to. And that really raises the ante, because in the Hasidic story, like now I don't remember. I'll take a look and see here. Maybe I'll share it again here and go back. Yeah, here we go. The seer of Lublin is the one who's crying. He's so upset to have forgotten God, even for a second. What a crime to forget about God while we're alive. And so the response of the Yehudi, the holy Jew of Prussia, here, which is so powerful, is to say, well, then you remembered. And when you remember, it's as if what you think you've forgotten was not forgotten. Something forgotten that's eventually remembered does not qualify as forgotten. To me, that really softens the blow, because I go through, of course, myself, I go through long stretches of forgetfulness in my life, and I assume many of you do as well. And then I wake up and say, how could I have taken it all for granted? How could I, have forgotten that for which I should feel grateful? And knowing that teaching now, I find quite helpful. Because number one, it credits the remembering. It says, okay, now you remember. And in that remembering, that can transform the period when I thought I had forgotten. It even raises the question about, when I am forgetting, whether in some level I am still remembering, I'm still aware underneath the, down a couple of levels below the level of consciousness, aware of the truth that is still present. That's another way to think about it. That I know that. And then the Dickens quote is really powerful, because it essentially says, we're always tethered to the source. Nothing is ever really forgotten. Certainly not forgotten by the divine source. So that while I may fall prey to the illusion that I'm separate and disconnected, the truth is I'm always tethered. We are always tethered to God. Thank you, Elizabeth, for this quote from John O'Donohue, who I love. I am amazed that we are such postgraduate and professional forgetters. It is kind of amazing. It is kind of amazing. Okay, friends. Thank you, Florence, for reminding us of our dear friend, Mickey Young. The good is never forgotten. Okay, friends. Wonderful to be with you as always. I look forward to being with you for the rest of the week. So be safe and well. Thanks, Adi. And take care, everyone.